So when we're talking about segregation of neighborhoods and all of the downstream effects that segregation of neighborhoods can have, how has segregation both historically and today influenced education systems?
Well, I'll throw a stat at you that shows the impact of segregation on schooling systems, that school districts or schools with predominantly Black children, Black, brown, and Asian children, children of color, receive $23 billion less in funding than their white counterparts. And that's largely because the system of financing public education essentially is still rooted in property taxes, which are often a result of or reflect housing segregation as much as anything.
Is that nationwide? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
Is that nationwide? So all public schools in the US are funded based on property taxes?
Well, no, it's a mixture. It's property, but property taxes are a major part of the formula, including state allocation. There's federal formulas that address some differences, but because of property value differences in neighborhoods that are driven a lot by housing segregation, we still see this huge gap.
Right.
And so when it comes to schooling, people, again, this is another thing, we blame schools. Whenever, I don't know, if I have $1 for every time someone told me, if we could only fix the schools, everything will be all right. Well, how schools are financed is really the problem. And when you blame schools, you're essentially abdicating your responsibility for addressing the reasons why schools are underfunded or underperforming. And so we can't keep blaming Black people, brown people on the slick by blaming education. We must address the root causes of discrimination.
Okay, so when it comes to education and education policies, you're pointing out the statistic about just the vast underfunding of primarily Black or non-white schools. And along with that, there's this assumption that the white schools are the good ones, right? Or those are the ones that you would want your children to go to because they're going to be better funded or for a variety of other reasons. How have US education policies either attempted to basically assimilate racialized groups or to exclude racialized groups over time? And how can we see that sort of mirrored in these systems of inequality today?
The Brown v. Board decision, which deemed separate but equal unconstitutional, set off an effort to desegregate, particularly public schools, but all public institutions. And there was real resistance to that change. So that's when you saw, particularly in the South, but not also in the North, white families holding up signs, spitting on people, intimidating families to not go into the school. And by the way, the burden was on Black families usually to integrate, not on white families to integrate. But what they did not do is change policy in a way that would, one, make sure that public schools and Black communities were properly financed. And for me, that's been more paramount than anything, because there are many schools that are desegregated, but they still, because of the percentage of Black children and families who live in low-income neighborhoods, they're really not getting the resources they deserve. And so we really do need to address this school financing issue by essentially figuring out ways to close those gaps financially that exist between white districts and Black districts and or schools. But also, I want to point out that there are many other policies at various levels that also just extract wealth from schools. I did a lot in the charter school space. I used to run 4 charter schools in New Orleans, and the effort was to reform schools. Well, charter schools also, because of the way they were set up, would essentially pull money from the district, and districts essentially exist because it's a way to get a certain economy of scale. And so when you pull money from that the district, you're essentially limiting its ability to get the kind of services at a scale. You need goods and services. And so many of our reforms that have tried to get at this choice has really been about making an argument, in my opinion, to having the freedom to discriminate against Black institutions. Black institutions, Black school boards, Black universities are treated like Black people. They're over policed. They're always people are trying to take them over. They do everything except fund them. And so for me, it starts with making sure that we fund Black institutions as well. And probably we need some form of stimulus in those institutions because they've been abused for so long. And we need to find a way to make them whole.